Now to China, LinkedIn becoming the latest technology giant to bow to China and do Beijing censorship bidding. This week, LinkedIn blocked the profiles of several U.S. journalists from its Chinese-based platform due to what they called prohibited content. My next guest is one of those journalists. She was affected. Joining me right now is Axios China reporter Bethany Allen-Ebrahimian. Bethany, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much. And let me compliment you on all of your reporting on China over the last few years. Thanks very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
Tell me what happened with LinkedIn.
Sure. So last week, I received an email from LinkedIn customer service telling me that due to prohibited content somewhere on my profile would no longer be viewable in the Chinese market. Now, when I reached out to LinkedIn, both through customer service and in my position as a journalist to their press team, they did not explain to me what content specifically was considered prohibited. They did not tell me whether or not the Chinese government had asked for my account to be blocked, or if they maintained their own internal list of prohibited topics. And that's quite important because Apple does maintain, according to New York Times reporting, a list of prohibited content that is internally maintained by employees. If LinkedIn has its own list, we need to know, are they self-censoring on behalf of the Chinese government?
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, and you have been reporting honestly on the CCP, its efforts to overtake the United States as the #1 superpower, its efforts to bully its neighbors in the South China Sea, to invade places like Hong Kong, as well as, as I mentioned, put military bases up wherever they wanted around the South China Sea. Perhaps that is one of the reasons that the CCP in Beijing is not a fan of your reporting, and they want it censored.
It could be. I mentioned in my LinkedIn profile that I have worked on the Xinjiang mass internment camps, part of China's ongoing genocide against the Uyghurs there. That's a very sensitive issue. But, what we've seen from other journalists and other people whose profiles were blocked is that LinkedIn doesn't say what content it is. So there's this, it seems to be deliberate vagueness, this lack of transparency. When LinkedIn first began its China operations in 2014, they said that they promised transparency in their China operations. And they also admitted back then, this is 7 years ago, that they would be upholding local law, meaning censoring. But the problem is that the Chinese government has become more and more and more strict. They have decided to enforce their censorship with an ever-widening brush. And now they're forcing companies like Zoom, like LinkedIn, that have significant China operations to censor more and more profiles. And what we need to see here in the U.S. is greater awareness of this, greater congressional pushback, and greater efforts by the Biden administration to prevent this, because what we have here is an imbalance. There's huge pressure from the Chinese government on LinkedIn, putting their profits and their revenues at stake, but we don't have the same pressure coming from the U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned the Xinjiang region. There are stories of hundreds of police officers armed with rifles going in, taking Uyghur communities out, handcuffing, hooding them, threatening to shoot them if they resisted. But my real focus is corporate America and the CCP. We saw a string of indictments under Secretary Pompeo, and we're going to talk with Pompeo in a few minutes, and the Trump administration, where we saw indictments of people who didn't reveal that they were working with the CCP. And we know that the CCP sends spies into America and tries to get inside some of our most important institutions. My question is, how many spies have been sent into Wall Street firms? I'm working on reporting on the CCP sending spies into some major Wall Street firms right now. Bethany, what do we know in terms of this practice of the Chinese Communist Party sending people, spies, into abusing visa processes? They've abused the student visa process. It's questionable whether or not they've abused something like the Schwarzman's Scholars, which is another program that brings Chinese students in. many of these people have been tasked with a task to go back and send information back to the CCP. What do you know about that in terms of the CCP's program of sending spies into corporate America and getting inside of some of our most important institutions?
Well, I think the most important thing, to start out with this question is to say that the overwhelming majority of Chinese people who are employees at U.S. companies, who are here as students, who are here on visas, are normal people who deserve our trust and our respect. Also, what's important to note is that, people who are not Chinese citizens, who are American-born, also are very much guilty of implementing, falling to CCP pressure to do what the Chinese government wants, because there's an enormous financial incentive. The CCP has made it very clear that if you do what the Chinese government wants, if you send them information, they'll pay you directly. They will grant you market access. There's a ton of riches to be had here. So I think it's less a question of worrying about visas and much more a question of making sure that corporate America is facing tough, regulations to ensure that their market activities are in line with democratic values, not in line with the CCP's own values, because that's really what we're seeing here. But to address your question, I think Zoom is an interesting example of this, because we did see an indictment, certainly under the Trump administration, from the Department of Justice in December of last year, indicating that an employee of Zoom who was based in China had been acting more or less as an agent of the Ministry of State Security and had been subverting Zoom's own processes in order to censor and to shut down Zoom meetings that were held on sensitive topics around the world, including the Tiananmen massacre. And so as a result of that, indictment, one thing that Zoom did was to start an insider threat program by which they vet employees who are in sensitive positions. And I think it's important, again, to note that anyone, not just Chinese nationals, can, and we've seen this from previous indictments, can be turned, as it were. So that's an important thing to note.
Well, that's right. And this is not about the Chinese people. This is about the Chinese Communist Party and what they are forcing some of their people to do. But you're right. It's not just Chinese. You've had the head of the biology department at Harvard, get indicted under the Trump administration because he was actually taking money from the CCP, sending them information from Harvard and not revealing that. But my question is, why isn't the Biden administration doing anything about it? President Biden and Chinese leaders Xi Jinping have set a virtual meeting before the end of the year. This comes after Biden asked Xi to meet in person, and Xi said no, he won't meet with Biden in person. There are growing tensions, we know, between Beijing and Taiwan. China sending nearly 150 fighter planes into Taiwan's airspace last week, bullying Taiwan, so much so that the defense minister there says that the CCP could launch an attack on the island in the next 4 years, Bethany. So your thoughts on what kind of policy should be happening right now to stop Beijing from doing this? The stealing of intellectual property has not stopped. The sending in spies to corporate America and important institutions throughout academia and Hollywood has not stopped. Why isn't the administration doing anything about it, do you think?
Right. So, the issue with Taiwan, we're certainly at a point of high tension right now. In the past 9 months, there have been more than 500 bombers and jet fighters sent, into, Taiwan's close airspace from China. Compared to last year, in all of last year, there were only 300 such incursions. So we are seeing a stronger push from the Chinese government, a lot more saber rattling. And this comes, as you said, at a time where the Chinese government is really pushing itself in every sector and industry around the world. What we have seen from the Biden administration is a focus on strengthening diplomatic partnerships around the challenge from China. So we've had, now the first in-person summit for the Quad. That's Australia, Japan, India, and the United States, 4 important Indo-Pacific democracies. We've just seen, a couple weeks ago, the Australia, UK, US, a new defense pact there. So What the Biden administration is focusing on is building up some of these larger diplomatic alliances to counter China. What we haven't seen as much of that we did see during the Trump administration is directly addressing some of these very specific domestic issues. And what I would like to see are much stronger pushes for corporate America specifically. And that is difficult because it involves taking on a lot of power and a lot of money interests.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're making money on China. Bethany, it's great to get your insights. I'm sorry that happened to you with LinkedIn. We'll be watching Bethany Allen-Ebrahimian. We'll be right back.